Drew Sjodin entered the world on the 26th of September, 1981, in the small, peaceful town of Pequot Lakes, Minnesota. From childhood, she radiated energy and ambition. Her passions included art and crafts, and she had a natural athleticism that kept her busy with basketball, volleyball, and golf. But Drew wasn't just about hobbies. She had a heart for service, always lending a hand through various charitable causes. Her warmth and sincerity made her widely loved, and in high school she was honored as prom queen. After finishing high school, Drew took a major step forward and enrolled at the University of North Dakota, choosing to pursue a degree in fine arts. Even though the university was nearly 3 hours away from home, she remained closely tied to her family, visiting them often. Balancing school life with grace, Drew juggled her coursework, where she excelled, 2 part-time jobs, and campus involvement. Her dedication to charity work didn't fade either. She stayed active in volunteer projects that aligned with her values. Always looking for new experiences, Drew joined a university travel program that allowed her to explore different places. She was especially thrilled about an upcoming trip to Australia. Around this time, she began dating a man named Chris, and their bond quickly grew serious. They were already imagining a shared future together. On the 22nd of November, 2003, 22-year-old Drew prepared for her usual Saturday shift at a clothing store where she worked part-time. That evening, she was also scheduled to waitress at a local nightclub. After wrapping up her shift at the store, she browsed a nearby shop in the mall and bought a new purse. As she headed toward the parking lot, she called Chris, and the two chatted for a few minutes. But something odd happened during the call. Drew suddenly went quiet. After a brief pause, she uttered the words, "Oh my God, okay," and then the line abruptly went dead. At first, Chris didn't panic. He assumed the signal had dropped or Drew's phone battery had died. 3 hours later, he got another call from Drew's phone. When he picked up, there was only silence. He could hear faint background noises, wind maybe, and soft beeping like phone keys being pressed. He called her name several times, but there was no reply. When he tried calling back, Drew didn't answer. Now deeply unsettled, Chris reached out to her roommate to check if she'd heard from Drew. The roommate hadn't seen or spoken to her all day, but assumed Drew was probably busy with her shifts and suggested not jumping to conclusions. But that changed quickly. Soon after, Drew's roommate received a call from the manager at the nightclub. Drew hadn't shown up for her shift. She hadn't even called in, something totally unlike her. This alarmed the roommate. Recalling the strange call Chris described, she feared something might be seriously wrong. She started calling hospitals in case Drew had been admitted, but no one matching her description had been brought in. As night fell with no sign of Drew, her roommate contacted the police, explaining that Drew had missed work, hadn't come home, and had made an eerie call earlier in the day. Still, the police didn't consider it urgent. Drew was an adult, and there wasn't yet enough evidence to suggest foul play. They advised waiting. Unwilling to sit idly by, Drew's roommate turned to the university's campus police. Unlike the city officers, they immediately began searching. Their first destination was the mall, where Drew had worked that afternoon. Her car was still there, parked where she'd left it. The doors were unlocked, and there was nothing visibly out of place. No sign of a struggle. However, something strange caught their eye. On the ground near her car was a small knife sheath. This discovery prompted campus police to alert the local authorities, who now began taking the case more seriously. Investigators requested the mall's CCTV footage, but Drew's car had unfortunately been parked in a blind spot, beyond the reach of the security cameras. To piece together her final moments, they began sifting through interior footage from the mall, analyzing hours of video to trace her steps. News of Drew's disappearance spread quickly at the university. A massive search effort launched, with hundreds of students joining in. They combed through city streets, riverbanks, trails, and secluded areas, hoping for any sign of her. Faculty members encouraged anyone with information to come forward. Police also examined Drew's phone records, which matched Chris's version of events. But when they pulled up her phone's location data, they discovered something odd. Drew's last call to Chris hadn't been made from the mall. It had come from another town, roughly 30 minutes away. Given that her car was still at the mall, it was clear she hadn't driven herself there. This pointed to a likely abduction. Investigators believed that the background sounds on the call, the wind, the button presses, may have been from that second location. Despite intensive efforts, no solid leads emerged in the following days. Search teams persisted, and investigators continued reviewing security footage. 2 days later, a clue finally surfaced. In the nearby town of Crookston, close to where Drew's phone had last pinged, a black shoe was found by the riverbank. When Drew's roommate saw it, she instantly recognized it as Drew's action. The find deepened fears that Drew had been abducted and taken far from home. Police alerted surrounding jurisdictions and asked for their assistance. Soon after, they found mall footage showing Drew that day. She was casually visiting stores, likely shopping for holiday gifts. The video helped confirm her outfit, including the same black shoes, one of which was now at the riverbank. Investigators then looked for anyone suspicious seen around Drew. One man stood out, a middle-aged individual dressed in black, walking with a cane. His behavior was disturbing. He entered the mall's grocery store repeatedly without buying anything, and instead seemed to watch other shoppers, especially women. Footage showed him sitting on a bench outside, observing people. At one point, he followed a young woman who resembled Drew. Additional clips showed him trailing other women through the mall. Though the footage didn't reveal his identity, detectives cross-checked local criminal records. They narrowed down a list of 60 men to 4 based on appearance. Among them was Alfonso Rodriguez Jr., age 50, a man whose history aligned too closely for comfort. Rodriguez had faced serious medical issues growing up, making social life and school difficult. One leg was shorter than the other, causing him to rely on a cane. His early adult life was riddled with drug abuse and violence. At 21, he attacked a woman after she offered him a ride, threatening her with a knife. He attempted 2 more assaults the same month and was sentenced to therapy and supervision. After release, he was arrested again but not convicted due to lack of evidence. Later, he stabbed another woman during an abduction attempt and was sent to prison for 23 years. He was released on May 1, 2003, just 7 months before Drew vanished. After his release, he moved in with his mother in Crookston, the town where Drew's shoe had been discovered. Detectives quickly brought Rodriguez in for questioning. He admitted being at the mall that day but claimed he was only there to watch a movie. He even gave a film title, but investigators found out the movie wasn't playing at any theater in town. Knowing he lied, police asked to search his vehicle. Rodriguez agreed. Inside, they found a store receipt for a pocket knife. The model matched the sheath found near Drew's car. More chilling was the knife itself, submerged in cleaning fluid. Blood residue was detected, and DNA tests confirmed a match with Drew's. They also found one of her shoes and another knife with her blood still on it. By the 10th of December, Rodriguez was arrested for kidnapping and suspected murder, but Drew's body was still missing, and he refused to confess. Volunteers continued to search, but a harsh winter slowed progress. Months passed with no developments. In March 2004, as Alfonso pleaded not guilty and preparations for trial began, most had lost hope Drew was still alive. Then, on the 17th of April, spring thaw revealed her body in a river just west of Crookston. She'd likely died within 3 hours of being abducted. Her body showed signs of assault, stab wounds, and possible strangulation. The exact cause of death was never fully confirmed. Hypothermia may have also played a role. Now, with her body recovered, federal prosecutors stepped in. Because Drew was taken in North Dakota and murdered in Minnesota, the case fell under federal jurisdiction, making the death penalty possible, even though both states had outlawed it. Despite divided public opinion, prosecutors pressed forward. In 2006, the trial began. Alfonso maintained his innocence, but the evidence was overwhelming. On the 8th of February, 2007, he was sentenced to death. Though the execution was delayed, as is common with death penalty cases, Drew's family focused their grief into advocacy. They championed the creation of a national registry for violent offenders. Later that year, President George W. Bush signed Drew's Law, making it easier for the public to access details about those convicted of violent crimes. Drew's family maintained Alfonso should never have been freed. Eventually, even the head doctor at the rehab center publicly expressed his disapproval of Alfonso's release. He had pushed for Alfonso to be transferred straight from the facility to prison, insisting that he was still a risk to the public. But his concerns were dismissed, and Alfonso was allowed to return to society, a decision that would later prove to be disastrous. Unfortunately for Drew's family, the story didn't end with the original sentencing. In 2011, Alfonso's defense filed an appeal, arguing that he had cognitive limitations. That effort didn't succeed. However, a decade later, in 2021, they returned to court, and this time, the outcome was different. A judge agreed that Rodriguez likely had intellectual disabilities and pointed out that this aspect hadn't been fairly addressed during the first trial. The court also took into account his unstable upbringing and serious medical conditions. His lawyers also challenged the prosecution's portrayal of Drew's injuries, claiming that the forensic expert had overstated the brutality of what happened. These arguments led to the case being reopened, forcing Drew's family to once again face the legal system in pursuit of justice. In the end, the court vacated the death sentence and ordered a new trial. By March 2023, Alfonso was sentenced again, this time to life imprisonment without any chance of release. What made the situation even more chilling was that Rodriguez had already admitted to the crime in a 2013 interview while on death row. Still, he now avoids execution and will remain in prison for the rest of his life. To keep Drew's memory alive, her university created a scholarship fund in her honor. Her family also built a memorial garden in her hometown, and there are ongoing efforts to add a similar tribute on her college campus. In the early 1970s, South Wales, a region known more for its coal mines and steelworks than for violent crime, was gripped by fear and confusion. Over the course of a few months in 1973, three 16-year-old girls were brutally murdered in what would become the largest manhunt in Welsh history and a landmark case in forensic science. The perpetrator would be known infamously as the Saturday Night Strangler. The first victim was Sandra Newton, a 16-year-old girl from the nearby town of Britton Ferry. On a July night in 1973, Sandra had been out with her boyfriend and was walking the 5-mile route home around 1 a.m. When she failed to arrive, the community grew worried. 2 days later, her body was discovered near a coal mine in Tanmar, dumped in a ditch at the entrance of a culvert. The crime scene was chillingly careless. Little effort had been made to hide the body. Sandra had been indecently assaulted, struck on the head, and strangled with her own skirt. Police suspected that she had tried to hitchhike her way home and believed the killer was local, possessing detailed knowledge of the remote dumping site. Only 2 months later, in September, two best friends, Geraldine Hughes and Pauline Floyd, both age 16, vanished after a night out in Swansea. They too had been hitchhiking their way home. Their bodies were found in woodland near Landry, only 7 miles from where Sandra's body had been discovered. The girls had suffered the same brutal fate: indecent assault, beatings, and strangulation. The investigation revealed a haunting detail. One of the girls had attempted to escape, making it yards from the road near her father's workplace, but was caught and killed by the attacker. These horrific crimes plunged South Wales into terror. Brutal attacks on young teenage girls were almost unheard of in the area, and the fact that the perpetrator was still at large created a climate of fear and desperation. The community mourned, and the police launched what became the largest manhunt in Welsh history. A task force of 150 officers interviewed 35,000 people who fit the rough description of the suspect: a man in his early 30s with bushy hair and a mustache, driving a light-colored Morris 1100. Witnesses recalled seeing the girls leave Swansea that night, entering a car driven by a man matching that description. But despite the enormity of the investigation and the painstaking efforts of law enforcement, no arrests were made. Fear grew that the killer might never be caught. From the start, police believed the same man was responsible for all 3 murders. However, the investigation was complicated by the fact that Sandra Newton's case was treated separately from that of Geraldine and Pauline. Sandra's boyfriend, who was the last person seen with her, became the prime suspect in her death. Yet, he consistently maintained his innocence and was never charged. Decades passed, and the case went cold. Then, in the early 2000s, South Wales police reopened the files as part of Operation Magnum, an initiative to apply emerging forensic science to cold cases. The key breakthrough came from advances in DNA technology. Forensic scientists isolated male DNA stains on Geraldine and Pauline's clothing, confirming that the same man was responsible for both murders. However, the DNA did not match anyone on the existing national database. A year into the investigation, a similar male DNA sample was found on Sandra Newton's underwear. Dr. Colin Dark, the forensic scientist leading the DNA work, described the moment vividly. "I recognized straight away from a particular feature of the DNA that this was the same perpetrator." This was an absolute bombshell because it proved a serial offender was operating in South Wales in 1973, ending the lives of young girls. This discovery exonerated Sandra's boyfriend once and for all. Detective Inspector Paul Bethel reflected on the moment. "For the first time in almost 30 years, we knew the same man had taken the lives of all three girls. Despite the DNA evidence, the perpetrator was not in the database. This forced the detectives to look for alternative ways to identify him. Inspired by the principle that DNA is inherited, Dr. Dark and his team pioneered a groundbreaking technique, now known as familial DNA profiling, searching for close relatives of the offender on the database to narrow down the suspect list. They painstakingly printed out thousands of DNA profiles from men in the South Wales area, manually crossing out those who didn't match. After hours of work, about 100 half-matches remained, potentially children of the offender. Simultaneously, the police had whittled down their suspect pool from 35,000 to 500 based on witness descriptions, vehicle ownership, and previous violent offenses. Cross-referencing these lists led to one surname, Kappen. Paul Kappen, a local car thief, had DNA on the database due to his offenses, but he was only 7 years old in 1973. His father, Joseph William Kappen, however, was a very different story. Joseph Kappen, a bouncer and part-time bus driver on Port Talbot Sandfields Council estate, matched the physical description given by witnesses. He had a history of domestic violence and petty crimes, including assault and burglary, and was known in the community as a violent loner. Police had questioned him in 1973. He claimed his car was broken down on the night of the attacks, and his wife provided him with an alibi. Kappen was notorious for his aggressive behavior, including abusing his wife Christine Powell, whom he married in 1964. Christine later testified that Kappen assaulted her every 2 weeks and was responsible for killing the family dog in front of their son, Paul. His pattern of pursuing local teenage girls during his work as a nightclub bouncer and bus driver further solidified suspicions. In 1964, he had attempted to sexually assault a 15-year-old girl who managed to escape. A major obstacle confronted detectives. The prime suspect, Joseph Kappen, had died of lung cancer in 1990, aged just 48. To confirm their suspicions, the police sought DNA samples from Kappen's ex-wife and daughter, which provided 2/3 of his genetic profile. The match was strong but incomplete. The only way to be certain was to exhume Kappen's body. The first time in UK history a suspect would be exhumed for DNA proof of guilt. Permission was required from the highest level of government. Then Home Secretary Lord Blunkett approved the exhumation after weighing the evidence and the need for closure for the victims' families. In May 2002, at midnight under ominous skies, Kappen's coffin was exhumed. Dr. Dark recalled the moment. "It was a horrible night, and just as we got to Kappen's coffin, there was a clap of thunder. It was as if evil had been identified. It sent shivers down my spine." DNA analysis at Swansea's Morrison Hospital confirmed what detectives had long suspected. Joseph William Kappen was the Saturday night strangler responsible for all 3 murders. Kappen was born in 1941 and grew up in a broken home, raised by his stepfather. From the age of 12, he attracted police attention for petty crimes and went on to rack up over 30 convictions, including car theft, burglary, and assault. His violent temper, criminal history, and tendency to prey on local teenage girls made him a perfect, albeit hidden, predator. Kappen is also suspected of a 4th attack in February 1976. His son, Paul's DNA, was key to identifying him posthumously, marking the first time a serial offender was identified through familial DNA profiling anywhere in the world, and the first documented serial killer in Welsh history. For the families of the victims, the breakthrough brought a mixture of relief and sorrow. Julie Begley, Geraldine Hughes's cousin, said, "No words can describe the way we all felt. It was a huge relief. None of us ever stopped hoping that one day we would find out who he was. Although you get on with your life, it never goes away." Geraldine was a fantastic girl. She was always full of fun. Sandra Newton's friend, Teresa May, shared, "I believe I will see her again, and we have got a lot of catching up to do. I have been going down to her grave for 49 years, and it is hard to believe she is there. My beautiful friend. She had her life taken away from her, her future taken away from her. I still think about her now. All these things that we could have and should have done together. But after all of those years, she can finally rest in peace now." The South Wales murders and Joseph William Kappen's identification marked a turning point in criminal investigations. The use of familial DNA profiling pioneered by Dr. Colin Dark's team became a revolutionary tool in solving cold cases worldwide, saving countless victims from the anonymity of unsolved crimes. Though justice came decades too late for Sandra, Geraldine, and Pauline, their stories and the relentless efforts of the police and forensic scientists changed the future of criminal investigations forever. The pioneering use of familial DNA profiling in their case set a new standard in forensic science, opening the door for countless cold cases to be revisited and solved. It demonstrated the power of perseverance, innovation, and collaboration between law enforcement and science, offering hope to families who had long suffered in silence. Most importantly, it ensured that Joseph William Kappen's reign of terror was finally ended in the eyes of the law, giving these young victims a measure of peace and a lasting legacy that no longer allowed their voices to be forgotten.